So what are the principles that have remained the same? Do you think there is this steady, hey, over 30 years, this is never going to change about leadership, and you've got to understand that?
Yeah, I'll give you one that has stayed the same despite how much the world has changed. The ability for a leader to navigate healthy conflict, that has always been true. I think it is even more true today than the need for it is greater today for a number of reasons. Number one, we're all having more conflict than we've ever had before, right? I mean, the last 2 years, it's just been hard conversation after hard conversation. And what's amazing, George, or now I don't know if it's good or bad. I guess parts of it are good, and then some of it's a little dangerous. But it's one of those it is what it is kind of things. Yesterday's taboo topics are becoming today's interview questions.
Ooh, that's good.
So there was a day where you didn't talk about religion at work, right? You didn't talk about your personal life at work. Well, now, I mean, I've had people in interview questions say, hey, tell me what your view on sexual orientation is. What is your view on gender identity? Tell me more about what your organization did in the wake of George Floyd's murder.
Wow.
And I'm like, can you, just real quick, can you tell me your name again? Like, what we just met.
Turned into interrogation real quick.
Yes, and I understand why employees want answers to those questions, and I'm not mad at them for that. I think it's great. I would love to know that as well. My point is that there was a day where we didn't talk about that at work, and now we're talking about that on a regular basis. Every organization is talking about some of the most complicated, complex issues in the world. We're having to talk about those in bite-sized ways and in work relationships where we might not have a lot of security or we might not have a strong base of a relationship. And that's one reason why conflict is more important. Another reason is because we're not exactly getting better at conflict. I would say we're probably getting worse, right? I mean, helicopter.
Is it scarier because if you respond the wrong way, there's more consequences?
Yeah,
I mean, is that part of it?
Of course. And because I think our emotional intelligence is waning as a society, right? The more we all know this, but the more we stare at our screens, the less able we are to have hard, complicated, complex, high stakes emotional conversations because we're used to retreating to our corner and then lobbing insults to the other group of people or to the other person.
Our critical thinking skills, our brain's turning to mush, and we have no way to do this anymore. Right?
You said it, not I did, but you're exactly right, yeah. Or I don't know, even with younger generations, I think, to your point of, do we just not know how to do it anymore, or have we never even learned how to do it, right? We have these, helicopter parenting is a significant thing. Jonathan Haidt's book, The Coddling of the American Mind, is a fascinating read, but he's got so many stories of people that work at universities and HR executives who say, hey, we offered the 24-year-old the job, and the 24-year-old said, well, would you call my mom and just tell her the details of this? I mean, that's a thing. That's like a real thing.
Wow.
And so all that to say, conflict is more important today than it's ever been. And if you're going to be a leader in the future, if you are an aspiring leader, you have to grow in your ability to handle complicated, complex, high-stakes, emotional conversations in a productive way, because it's going to be even more required in the future as we look toward the way the world is changing.
Yeah. It just reminds me of the importance of having your values in stone, written down. Everyone knows it. There's no confusion, because it can deflate those and go, okay, well, we'll just filter it through our values.
Yes.
And that's what people are wanting to know, especially these younger generations. They're going, I don't just want to work somewhere for a paycheck. I want to work somewhere that aligns with my values.
Yes.
And so I think that's where those questions are coming from. And leaders, you got to have an answer.
And how do my values make other people feel? The emotional intelligence to know when would I bring out my personal value? And when do I go, you know what, now's not the time? And if I bring it out, am I aware of how this might make the other person feel? I think that's really important too, because you're right. Knowing what I believe and where I am and what I think is true is certainly important. And it can feel dangerous at times in today's climate of employment.
Well, and it feels impossible to go, well, your values have to perfectly align with every single thing that I believe. And
You're so right.
it's also an impossible task on the other side. So it takes a level of maturity.
My own values hardly align with myself sometimes. I mean, so you're right. To think that we're going to find an organization that completely aligns, or find people that, well, I got to agree with them 100% to be able to work with them. I don't see that happening in the future.
Yeah.
That's one of the ways the world is changing. So conflict is one area where, that's always been true. But I think it's even more true as we look toward the future.